Workshop to order. The time is 12 noon. I wish to welcome you to the Superintendent's Workshop being held in the Joanne Idolette Junior TEC. I ask that out of respect to everyone, please silence all electronic devices. Also, if you have any materials that you wish to give to a board member or share with a board member, please give those to our Executive Assistant, Mrs. Moray. We will take a break every 2 hours if needed. Before that, let me know. I'd like to recognize the superintendent to explain the purpose of this workshop. Dr. Moore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The intent of this workshop is to, or the first part of it anyway, is to present items to the board for discussion that will ultimately come for board approval at an upcoming business meeting. The first item on the agenda will be presented by Dr. Jacobs.
Through the chair, on the agenda you will see 6 transportation agreements. 4 of those transportation agreements are with our charter schools. 2 of those transportation agreements are with the Boys and Girls Club, as well as, now I'm forgetting, Gifford Youth Achievement Center. These are standard items that come to you. Our charter school transportation agreements come on an annual basis. And then our agreements with our 2 other organizations are 3-year agreements. Mr. Bass has briefed each one of the board members on these agreements.
Hey, board members, any questions on that item? Okay.
Mr. Seymour.
Through the chair. At this time, I'd like to share with you the Brophy Golf Tournament that Vero Beach High School golfers will be participating in. This is a fundraising event for them. Money's all donated to their cause. The students will be leaving out Thursday, August 22nd, and returning Saturday, August 24th. They'll have 2 rounds in Arizona, and hopefully, you know, the young men will get a bigger, I would say more information and experience and knowledge of this entire trip, because it's more than just the golfing, it's the whole child. And I applaud Bella Nagy. He's the golf pro at Sandridge. I tried to have him here today, but he's participating in a golf tournament himself. But that's all that I have. Thank you.
Board members, any questions?
No.
No? I just have one. Are they going to get to visit Ping International Headquarters where they get to go in and see the simulations and everything that's in there, in the vault?
Yes, that it is on their schedule, but it depends on how long the golf tournament runs that day, so it's kind of crunched for them. They have to return a couple guys back for testing.
Okay, because that's a really great thing to add to that field trip. Okay, thank you.
Item C through E will be presented by Mr. Green.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Through the chair, the first item is the review of surplus property. You have 3 or 4 items that are 20 to 30 years old, a freezer, a trailer, and an ice machine. And then the rest of the items this time are AEDs. And as you remember, Mr. Seymour had presented that we have to upgrade those based on statutory requirements. You will see there is a little residual value left on them, and we have negotiated a $200 rebate for trade-in on those AEDs. So those will be traded back into the vendor who we purchased the new ones from to receive that rebate.
Board members, any questions on the AED? No, moving on.
Item D is the elevator systems at Sebastian River High School. I believe they're the J and the N wings. They are the only 2 elevators out of compliance with state statute and regulations around those. So this will upgrade them and they will be in compliance. It's the total cost is just over $349,000. There is about a $69,000 contingency fee. When you open things like that, something electrical or whatnot, unknown factors, those contingency fees then go back, unused contingencies go back into the capital 5-year plan to just keep funding the next projects down the list.
Board members, questions? Mr. Rosario?
I have a question. How long have these elevators been out of compliance?
I do not know the answer to that, actually.
Because in all of our auditing, this has not come up
This is a
before.
new statute, though.
Oh,
I do know that, but I don't know when that, so probably would have been this summer.
And just out of curiosity, what exactly is it that makes them out of compliance? Like, do we know what it is? Like, is it,
I do not know the details on that. I
Okay.
apologize.
I probably should have asked that before, but I
Yeah, but I
apologize.
will-
It just dawned on me now.
I will get that information for sure.
Anyone else?
I know it has to do with the electrical.
I have a question. So you said this contingency money, will somebody then be responsible for okaying anything that goes into that contingency fund?
Oh, yes, Nick,
Okay.
it goes through our Director
Through
of
Nick?
Facilities, Nick Westenberger.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Item E, as we had briefed before, each year we're required to have our financial accounting reviewed 1 out of every 3 years. That is done by the Auditor General's office. They conducted that audit this year. They did the financial audit, and then they do a single federal audit. Food service, ESE, title, and that rotates each year. On the off years from the Auditor General, we are required to contract for those services. This is a contract that will be coming with Cherry Beckert, who is on the state bid and state contract for those 2 years, next year and the year after, to do those financial audits for the school district. The cost of that is just over $100,000 per year, and we have got them down from about $125,000 to about $108,000, just through negotiations.
Board members, any questions about audits?
Nope.
Okay, moving on.
All right, the final item on my agenda prior to moving on to board member items is a review of House Bill 529, related Florida statutes as well as board policies. And I also, for the board, the pleasure of the board, highlighted a number of systems that the district had in place associated with those state statutes and policies. So I've had the opportunity to review with all board members each of these associated state statutes and board policy. The conversation revolves around the board meeting of our last board meeting around the pledge, moment of silence. The board had a healthy conversation regarding those topics. During that time, it was discussed that we would be looking at associated policies. Ms. Rosario referenced during that time that she would take a stab at modifying or sharing with the rest of the board suggested changes to policy. So what I have is those policies that ultimately could or possibly be discussed. If you review the agenda, Ms. Rosario did make those recommendations. Myself and Mr. Sid had the opportunity to review and provide some feedback. I provided some additional feedback this morning. But Ms. Rosario did proffer those changes based on the conversation that took place at our last workshop. Probably the most appropriate thing to do is to review those changes unless board has questions at anything that I submitted.
Board members?
I do. It was initially my item, but I do have a couple of things that I'd like to bring up. So thank you very much, Dr. Moore, for that. Board members, I know that we are, if you want to, do we want to look at this now instead of waiting? Is that what you just suggested, Dr. Moore? Look at the.
Through the chair, all I'm doing was presenting that specific information. So if we're going to facilitate the conversation around the changes to proposed policies, I think that would probably be the most appropriate, however the board sees fit.
Okay, hold on one second. Dr. Jones, are you okay with going out of order?
Yes, I'm fine. We can
Okay.
go right into the line.
Go ahead, Ms. Rosario.
Why, Dr., you have other board members here that need to,
Because she was up first on the discussion.
Okay.
That's why.
why don't you just for
She
fairness,
says it's okay.
I understand, but for fairness, ask other board members
Do you
if
have a
they are.
problem with us going out of order?
No.
Do you have a problem with us going out of order?
Awesome.
There you go, Ms. Rosario, go ahead.
That's awesome. Okay, so there are some board members, you have two policies in front of you, or that should be in the attachment, that I did a crosswalk with the state statutes, just to align our policy with the requirements in the state statutes. What you see in green letter font is added language that was not there previously, but it is indeed in the statute. So essentially, I just kind of aligned what a policy, what is required within the statute to be included within our policy for religious and patriotic programs or religious observances and patriotic programs. The statute itself is titled the patriotic program, so it just seems to align really well. It makes sense. There are a couple of things here, board members, that I would like to change after talking with Dr. Moore and Mr. Ansbacher, which thank you very much, Mr. Ansbacher, for your feedback on this, and to Dr. Moore and staff for kind of looking over and just, suggesting some of these additional changes. If you look on the page, well, it's my page 2. The paragraph that begins with "nothing in this policy," I don't know if you all see it. The very last line is struck through. There's a line that goes right through that very last sentence. That last sentence says, "Observance of religious holidays through devotional exercises or acts of worship is prohibited." I think it makes better sense, as the superintendent suggested, to keep that sentence in there, but just make sure that we add mandatory observances are prohibited. So just add mandatory observance of religious holidays through devotional exercises or acts of worship is prohibited. That just seems to make sense, that we're not mandating that. If it's voluntary, that's different, then it's an individual choice, but otherwise, if it's mandated, that's where the school district has to put a strong line.
Ms. Berenborg?
Yes.
Ms. Rosario, will you tell me where you are again? Are you on policy 8,000
Sorry,
operations?
policy 8800, patriotic programs.
Page 2,
Third paragraph, top of second.
towards the top. First paragraph,
Okay.
last line.
I probably should have put page numbers on here, but I'm on page 2, top paragraph, last line. So including mandatory, keeping that whole sentence, but just saying mandatory observance instead, and that came as a recommendation from Dr. Moore. I would agree that that would seem appropriate. So that's the first. The second thing is all the way on the bottom of this page, under moment of silence, second paragraph, under moment of silence. The statute actually says that we can have from 1 up to 2 minutes of a moment of silence. I initially thought that we should have, everyone at 2 minutes of moment of silence because it seems appropriate. Feedback from staff said, well, your little ones might not understand how to regulate their time. That makes sense. I appreciate that feedback. So I actually wrote in here for first period classrooms in elementary grades to set 1 minute, and then secondary to have 2 minutes. That just seems age appropriate. Staff through Dr. Moore agreed. But the one thing that we did not that I didn't take into consideration, which I appreciate Dr. Moore bringing up again, was that I think there needs to be language in there that addresses the teacher and the parent discretion for students who are in pre-K, because they're really little, and then students who have ESE, specific ESE 504 or IEP plans that prohibit that long period of, maybe 2 minutes is way too long for a secondary student who has an IEP, depending on whatever that is. So I just think that, and I'm okay with Dr. Moore, taking the lead on how to word that, so long as board members are okay. That just seems, again, to make sense to kind of add that in there.
Let's just take each of your suggestions and see if there's any input. Anybody want to give input
Okay.
to that? Dr. Poska?
Yeah, I think I reviewed the policy changes with the staff, and I think overall I agree with most of them, including this one. I think overall it seems like a very good improvement to our policy, which will hopefully lend expectations to our teachers and staff on what's expected from them.
Dr. Jones?
On the 1 to 2 minutes now, in the state statute, it says you need to have 1 minute, correct, Dr. Moore? And you can go up to 2. So if we're saying 1 minute for elementary, 2 for high school, that's more than the state statute says. Am I
No.
correct?
Oh, sorry.
Just checking.
Through the chair, I don't think it's more than the state statute says. I think what the board is considering is being more specific based on the age of students, and we're including specific language regarding exceptionality as well as some of our pre-K students. So the way the statute is written, it is a minimum of 1 minute, but up to 2 minutes. And then ultimately, it allows the principal and school sites to implement that structure. This is taking it a step further and being specific to a specific amount of time in elementary school, a specific amount of time which is longer in secondary schools, and then adding a layer of discretion for our youngest of students and students with special needs.
I think that the exception for IEP students in kindergarten, maybe you don't have preschool, but kindergarten level makes
do have
sense.
preschool.
We do?
Yes.
Then it definitely makes sense. That we allow that exception at those youngest ages and any other inabilities that make it impractical.
Yeah, I agree. As long as there's an exception for exceptionalities and for young children, I'm fine with that.
Dr. Moore, when you, I know that you're going to word this, when you word it, if it's possible to say teacher and parent discretion, we might have, someone who has an IEP or a 504, which might not indicate that there is a time limitation, but a parent says, you know what, I know my child, I'd like it there to be a communication between parent and student. So however way you word that, that would honor their requests as well. So it's not just the district saying it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
I got it.
All right, thank you, board members. And then the other suggestion is in the part that reads Pledge of Allegiance. It is in the third paragraph that begins with lines through or strikeouts. Based on feedback, it just seems to make sense, again, to keep that second sentence that says, that has a strikeout, but it reads, "The board prohibits the intimidation of any student by any students or staff for the purpose of coercion, coercing participation." And so if we could keep that in, we want to be sure that our policy says we are not going to tolerate intimidation tactics by anyone under any circumstances. Okay? And then not for the board, but for staff, Dr. Moore, something that came to my mind as well when you brought this up. This policy is under section 8,000 operations. When you mentioned that to me, I just kind of thought maybe it shouldn't be under operation. I don't know why it would be under operations. Do we need this to be instead under 2,000 program or 3,000 instructional staff or 5,000 students? I mean, this is guiding, is that too much to kind of throw out there? But it just doesn't seem.
Through the chair, I'd have to digest that. As we all have learned intimately over the last several years, Neola structures its policies in a very unique way. So going back and understanding the impact of moving one particular thing, you start to peel back the layers of the onion in terms of what we're missing. So I'd have to do a little bit of research to say, is it appropriate here, or are there other implications if we did in fact move it?
And just for the record, Neola makes recommendations, it's up to the board to make the final decision. But I'm certainly okay with you kind of, going back and finding out. If we do need it in these other areas, it would just be a duplicate, correct? Just as some of the other ones, which I personally don't like duplicate policies, but I understand that it would fall under different categories.
Madam Chair.
Are you thinking about that?
Yeah, hold on.
Oh, no,
Are you thinking about saying something else?
no, I'm going to go back and
Okay.
and look at it.
I didn't know if you were thinking
Yeah.
about something else. Lastly, also, Dr. Moore, when we hire staff, teachers and additional staff, they are hired and they understand that they are to adhere to our board policies, all board policies and practices under their employment agreement. What happens, and I'm just going to throw this out there just as a question, because I'd like to hear the response as a superintendent. What happens in the case of a staff member who says, well, I don't agree with the Pledge of Allegiance, so I'm not going to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance in a classroom. But students, if you want to stand, you can stand. How are you, as a superintendent, going to handle a situation like that? Because this policy doesn't address that particular possibility.
Through the chair, and there's a responsibility to implement policy, as you have said. So it is providing the opportunity as it's prescribed in policy, because that is the expectation. So I have never been exposed to that particular situation. I'm sure there are individuals who may feel that way, but providing the opportunity without bias for those students to participate in ensuring that it's being implemented aligned to policy would be the expectation.
Okay.
Okay, board members. Mr. McDonald?
Nothing more to add.
Okay. Dr. Pasca?
I have nothing else to add.
On the pledge, when it says, I think it's second paragraph, each student shall be informed by a written notice published in the school student handbook, the student code of conduct, and/or similar publications pursuant to statute. Student has the right not to participate in reciting the pledge. Upon written request by his or her parent, the student must be excused from reciting the pledge, including standing and placing the right hand over his or her heart. So if a student does not stand and you do not have the written report from the parent, what happens to the student?
Through the chair, we'd make sure the student was aware of the procedure that was pushed out and the notification that was sent home to the parent at the beginning of the school year, and provide that parent with that notification and provide the parent with the opportunity to access that right if that's what he or she chooses to do.
I would assume you would take it like any other thing where a child is not following a rule, right? First offense, handle it this way. Second offense, do we have that in the student handbook?
I think through the chair, you identify what is the situation itself. So there's a progression of discipline when I'm being outwardly defiant, and there's this situation in which you have the right, with parent approval, not to participate. So making sure that the parent has been informed. At the beginning of schools, it is a ridiculously crazy time, so there's a number of forms going home. It's one of those particular forms. So making sure, the parent is involved. It may not be a matter of progressive discipline. It may be a matter of sharing information so the parent understands his or her rights and can either correct or modify the behavior or complete the appropriate paperwork.
Okay. I have a question about, it says, under the Pledge of Allegiance, it's taking it from state statute that the student has the right not to participate, blah, 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 but including standing and place the right hand over their heart. I see this is taken out of state statute. I find it interesting the state statute is ignoring something I did in my research, which is finding state law or federal law, which says you need to face the flag. So I find it interesting that that's not in state's law, but yet it's in federal law, that you face the flag during the pledge. Same thing during the national anthem. It's written in both of those. So I find it interesting that the state does not have that. Don't know if we want to add that or not, seeing that that's a federal law or part of federal policy, and it's also a recommendation from the veterans.
I would include it.
You're okay with that? Okay.
Yeah, I would, to the chair, yes, I would say that if it's in federal law, there's no reason we shouldn't be reflecting that as well.
Yeah, because you can have a kid standing and twirling around in place.
Right.
You know, I think just out of respect, let's be respectful.
Got it.
Good, Chair.
Yes.
A follow-up question to Dr. Moore from what you last said. Is it correct to summarize and assume that what you were saying in general is this ultimate decision lies in the hands of the parent and their decision informing the school, but also informing or guiding their child?
Through the chair, that is correct. We send home a form at the beginning of the school year, making sure the parent is aware. They complete that form if they so choose, and then we honor that information.
Okay, so it's the parent's ultimate decision then? Okay, thank you.
Right now, the students.
Okay.
One last
Dr.
question.
Jones?
What was the reasoning, sorry, for taking out the paragraph, however, no student shall be compelled, required to participate? And then we go on with the superintendent shall develop procedures which ensure that every staff member participates in an appropriate manner. What was the reasoning for taking that out?
What was that?
You had to strike over that one paragraph, however, no student shall be compelled, required to participate.
Bottom of third page.
Through the chair, I believe that line was stricken because the paragraph entered just prior covers that information. And then
Okay.
we are going to reinstate the second paragraph. The board
Okay.
prohibits and so on.
Okay, got it.
Anybody else? Mr. Rosario?
Yeah, and there was another reason, is because that line says no student shall be compelled or required, but our policy says they are required to stand for the pledge. It will say now they have to stand for the pledge unless a parent opts them out. But otherwise, that's why that sentence needs to be stricken. I have two more. Dr. Moore, you mentioned something about parents knowing their rights. In the letter that you provided, in one of the attachments, there was a letter there that says, "Dear parents," and then it says, "This letter is to notify you requiring the moment of silence." And it also states, "Will be honoring a requirement for a morning directly following the Pledge of Allegiance." This letter doesn't actually have, it needs to be revised because it doesn't have the opportunity for parents to, first of all, know what HB 529 is. So I think we need to capture that language in it. You're smiling because,
Because staff had already made those changes, but I didn't want to mislead the board and provide information that is yet to go home, so I intentionally provided what we provided last year. So
Right.
those, you just sound like
So-
my staff right now.
room
So-
for improvement, is that right?
Yes. Always, in all things.
So, and definitely language that includes what moment of silence is and what the statute is, maybe, include an attachment, and kind of let people know that the Pledge of Allegiance is not optional, essentially. So if you could do that, that would be great. I do have another thing that came to mind also. Same second page, second paragraph from the top. I have a strikeout through the word party. In looking at this, it has dawned on me that the distribution of such materials on district property should be by any person or employee, not just any employee. So you have visitors that come on campus, you don't want them to just hand out anything willy-nilly without following the appropriate policies. So it really should be any person or employee.
Doesn't party handle that person and, or employee.
Party was struck out.
Yeah, I know.
No, but it-
doesn't party indicate a person or employee?
Through the chair, personally, I like the word person better than party.
Okay. That's fine.
I'm not the attorney.
That's what I'm asking.
I actually thought that person sounded more human,
Okay.
and party is a phrase that's normally associated with being in a contract. You're a party or you're a non-party. And so, yeah, I absolutely agree that person probably just reads better.
That's why I asked, because I've seen the word party in contracts, so, okay. Anything else?
Beautiful. I can go on to the next policy.
Well, I want to ask something else.
Yes.
On page 2, that's where it was, where it says, 1, 2, third paragraph down, it says, however, such exercise or expression may, and then it's stricken out, be limited to lunch periods or other. So that's now going to read, however, such exercise or expression may not disrupt the educational process. Correct?
Through the chair, that was a question that I had, and I proposed my concern on two fronts. Just as much as the board wants to protect prayer, we need to protect instructional time.
Right.
So when it says to be limited to lunch periods and/or other non-instructional time periods when students are free to associate, that's before school, that's after school, that's during lunch. We are responsible for instructing the standards during instructional time. So I would recommend that we keep that. The second, as well as the second piece of the sentence, or on an individual basis in a manner that does not disrupt the educational process. Which means, yes, you are free before you sit down this Thursday to take your FAST assessment. You can pray that you've done all the work, you've done everything you need to do, and just, be at peace and demonstrate mastery. Amen. So we could include that as well. I don't want the board to be in a position where you're telling someone that they can't, and not to disrupt the educational process. So my recommendation would be that we just keep that, making sure that we're honoring instruction and clearly defining the opportunities to pray.
Yeah, I kind of want to go a little bit beyond this and knowing and seeing what's been happening in college campuses. Perhaps putting something in about not only not disrupting the educational process, but not disrupting the campus. I don't know if that's needed, if high schools are going to look like colleges right now, but I have a concern about that sort of thing happening. So I don't know how other board members feel about that.
Through the chair, that's not in this specific policy. I
Is
can
it
go
out-
back and
is it in
review the
another
code of
policy?
conduct. We have very clear expectations
Okay.
regarding the operation of a school day,
Disrupting, right.
as well as what we're doing within the confines of our free time being, lunch and before school, after school, as well as instructional time.
Okay, I just want to make sure because some people might use that opportunity of my religious right as being a disruption in another way. So that concerns me, that's all.
I'm okay with removing the strike through on that sentence. That makes sense.
$88.10.
Are we good? Move on? Okay. 8810 is just the follow-up. I was asked to just make sure that the recommended changes to 8800 patriotic programs would also kind of align with this policy, which is 8810. It is the American flag and the official motto, only because there is one section in 8800 that talks about the official motto. And so we just want to make sure that the language is the same. And that is included here in the green, as you can see it, and as well, just on that first page. And throughout, you'll see where it says, see also policy 8800, just so we make those references back to this one. Seems simple enough. Same thing, Dr. Moore, though, about 8,800 operations, if you can look into whether that should be under operations or instructional or something else.
Any board members, any comments on that one? Okay.
Awesome.
I was going to say, Madam Chair, that concludes my items, but we kind of jumped into the board's items with that particular item, so the rest is.
That's why I asked Dr. Jones if she minded if we jumped her item. Okay, do you want to go to the next one, Ms. Rosario?
The next one?
It was just those are
Thought
the
you had
two.
one more on there.
No, that was it.
Oh, no, okay. They're just on there twice, got it. Okay, so we are now to our discussion item A, NAEP results. Dr. Jones.
Yes, at the last board meeting, I had several questions from constituents relating to the NAEP test, and I asked Dr. Moore to put a short presentation ready for us. And I shared a link that I received from Tamika Brinson at the DOE last week, just a summary of what Governor DeSantis and Commissioner Diaz was saying. So this is just informative for our constituents, and then we can certainly open it up to questions.
Okay. Through the chair, I didn't know if
Yeah, I wanted to talk.
the exact content, so I did ask Dr. McMahon to put some information together, so just to facilitate the conversation, Dr. McMahon can quickly review this content, and then we can answer any questions the board may have regarding NAEP scores.
Do you need this, Dr. McMahon?
Dr. McMahon is also going to be one of our racers Friday, May 10th, for the trike races, so don't hurt him.
He's really throwing that term racers loosely. Through the chair, thank you. These are just a couple slides about NAEP. I wasn't very familiar with it, so when I saw it on the agenda, I thought maybe I might need to learn a little bit and just update my own information on it. So it is a congressionally mandated project. One thing that I learned was that it's not every year we administer it in every subject, in every grade level. In fact, it's actually quite sporadic. This year we're administering 4th, 8th, and 12th for reading and math. Next year it's just a long-term NAEP. The year after it's a couple grade levels, a couple subjects. There's one year where there's no NAEP assessments. So it's not every year and in every subject area. They just do 4th, 8th, and 12th grade. So no other grade levels will they ever administer. Indian River's participation. This past year in January, we had 2 classes in grade 8 at Oslo Middle School for math and 2 classes of 20 kids each in Imagine for grade 8 math and reading. So we did participate, but it was a total of, I think, 80 kids between the 2 schools, only at 1 grade level in the 2 subject areas. The previous Indian River participations in 2019 is noted there, prior to that 2016. So even with NAEP having assessments each year, Indian River does not participate every single year. We don't volunteer for it, nor do we turn it down. We are notified when we do have schools and grade levels selected. So it is something that we're just told we're participating in.
Yeah, we're
Voluntold. The achievement levels kind of tossed around. The big difference between NAEP and any other kind of assessment is in how they define proficient. NAEP proficient does not match the state's level of proficient. It is not a grade level measure. Their descriptor, it says that it represents solid academic performance and competency over challenging subject matter. And so proficient, rough estimates, level 4 and above on the state assessment, even though it's not an equivalent. And then they have a NAEP advanced, that would be level 5s and above, so forth. NAEP basic is partial mastery. One of the things that the NAEP folks have to have is an independent organization verify these achievement levels. That's what they're going through. So you might see some language on their site that these are trial achievement levels. It's because they have not been approved by that independent entity. And then also just a quick slide on, and this is not all the grade levels, it's not all the subject areas, but it does show Florida versus the nation. So you can see this is essentially Florida's scores. And then right here, where it says it's +6, what that means is that we're 6 points above the national average for Florida. And then, so see, let's see, grade 8 math, Florida is down 2 from the nation, primarily because Florida does push an acceleration in middle school. So we do have a large number of 8th graders in algebra geometry that would not be captured in this data. And that's traditionally why 8th grade has been a little bit lower than the nation. And then off on the right, you can see the different percentages of students at each level. So the way you would read this is 4th grade 2022. I feel like my hand's shaking looking at that. It's really not. Pretty steady. So 81% in 2022 was at or above this basic level, 41 at or above proficient, and then the 8 was the percent of students at or above advanced. And that's all I had.
Okay, Dr. Jones?
I just wanted to read a few things. I contacted Tamika Brinson at the DOE, and she sent me the summary, which I sent to you yesterday. Just some things that the governor and Commissioner Diaz talked about. Let's see. Education Week says we're ranked Florida number 3 for K-12 achievement. Again, this is from the DOE. Florida's math and English language arts test results show that African American students from economically disadvantaged families, and Hispanic students had gains on all mathematics and ELA. Florida is in the top 5 for average scale scores of Hispanic students. We are in the top 5 for average scale scores of students with disabilities, top 10 for average scale scores of Black students. And I wanted to read that grade 4 reading, number 3, up from number 4. Grade 4 math, number 2. Grade 8 reading, number 4. And grade 8 math, number 8, again with our Black students. Grade 4 reading, 3rd in the nation in average scale scores, up from 2019. So they felt pretty good about all of this for the most part. Obviously, we have some work to do in some math, and I think we all know that. But grade 4 math was 4th in the nation in average scale score. And this one I really like. Florida is the highest performing large state. Texas is 14th, Pennsylvania is 17th, California is 38th, and New York is 46th. So highest performing large state in grade 4. So when you look at how many students are tested at Oslo, I think you said in Imagine, I just wanted to make sure that when we look at these NAEP scores, Dr. McMahon, say one more time about proficiency in NAEP when we look at that.
Through the chair, I think whenever you hear of a measure, you want some context. And when you hear NAEP proficient, the context can't be states proficient. It doesn't mean the same thing. State defines proficiency level 3 and above. So school grades, the data that we share with the board about schools' performance, as it relates to state assessments, we are always measuring levels 3 and above. Sometimes we do like to show the level 1 percentage or high-end level 5s. But when it comes to NAEP proficient, it's not going to be the equivalent of the 3 and above that we would provide you with state data. It's more the qualitative descriptor is more of like an achievement level of 4 and 5 when you compare it to the state.
And just one last thing that came from the governor. We insisted on keeping schools open and guaranteed in-person learning in 2020 because we knew there would be widespread harm to our students if students were locked out. Today's results once again prove that we made the right decision. Obviously, in-person learning is much better. So I just wanted to share that with the board because we haven't talked about NAEP since I've been on the board. So,
Madam Chair, just one point of caution. When we say that we have to areas, maybe, I guess you're referring to the state has areas to improve in middle school math, but locally, I think it's important to point out that we're number 3 in the state, and we were number 57 in middle school acceleration, which is algebra and geometry, which is absolutely significant, and as I've referenced before, really pushing the state to address the impact that has on high school achievement,
right.
where 45% of our 10th graders are so smart, they've tested out of the proficiency component and learning gains component and lowest 25% because we provide them the opportunity to take those accelerated courses in middle school. So there is we're doing really, really good in math, and we've get a lot of notoriety from going from 57 to 3 in terms of advanced math coursework in middle schools.
Right, the accelerated points are more so in the high school, and the middle school and the high schools are not getting those algebra and geometry at 7th and 8th grade. But we still have work to do in our lower quartile math.
Students start to assess this week, regardless of what the result is going to be. I'm always going to say it could be better, so I'll say that right now. But I think what we're going to produce is going to be very, very encouraging and validate all the hard work that's been going on over the course of the last several years.
Thank you.
Okay, Nate? Any comments about Nate?
No.
Mr. Rosario?
No, thank you.
Okay. One thing, when I was a principal, my students were assessed for NAEP, fourth graders, and we never got their results back. Is that true still, right?
Through the chair, yes, and you'll never see district scores. They do have on NAEP's website they call it district aggregations, but it's actually major cities, so it would be like Miami, Jacksonville. So we'll never have an Indian River score for NAEP.
Yeah, and I want people to aware that we don't get that direct feedback about how our students did. So, okay, thank you. All right, we've already covered B, so on to C, Board Member Matters Purpose. Dr. Jones.
Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about board member matters. As you can see on our agenda, when it says board member matters, it's always at the end of the agenda, and it states board members report on community meetings and events attended. To me, that's the best part of the agenda because we can brag about our schools and community events and then give information and updates on our committees. I serve on several of those committees this year in the last couple of years. Bellsmere Planning and Zoning, Economic Development Council, Executive Roundtable, Value Adjustment Board, and some health committees. Each November, you let the chair know if you'd like to serve on one of those, and every one of them helps me learn more about this district and the community, and I'm very grateful to do that. What happened at the last meeting, April 22nd, and you can review it on YouTube, talking about an elected official and discussing the specific post this official did. To me, that's not the time or the place. It's politicizing on our board and going much more into detail about the post. This is about our school district. We are responsible for the education of students in this district, and that takes a lot of work. Politically making a statement about another city board is not for board member matters. My opinion is you go right to the source and let them know you're disappointed in that, but let's be board members who serve our student and community, and more importantly, get on a community or committee so you can share that information. Whether this changes or not, I, who's someone who's spent many, many years in this district, have never seen anything like that. It's just not the place. We are school board members, and our focus should be the education of these students. I wanted to make a statement about that.
Okay. Board members?
Yeah, I guess I'll just, I'll say, you know, if a city council has a lot of important decisions that they make in our community, a lot of what they do, obviously, is plan out, one of the major things they do is plan out transportation in a safe and effective way. Some of those things that they consider are obviously the speeds that the cars are going on this road, how large of an easement, how far does the sidewalk need to be away from that road. And there's really many variables that they have to consider. It's actually extremely complicated. And the reason it matters to the school board and the school district is because when you have somebody who clearly doesn't understand safety to the point where they would request dirty dildos be brought into a public restaurant, it's clear they don't have the mental capacity to make the calculus. And when you're the one deciding how that road is going to be built with what sidewalk that our kids are going to be coming to and from school on, when kids get hit by cars all the time, every day across the country, including in this state, that poses a great danger for our school district, our community, our children. And it's clear you guys don't take it seriously, but I do, and that's why it was important to bring up, because this person cannot understand what safety is and do the calculus needed to create a safe community for our children, and that's why I brought it up.
Anyone else? Mr. McDonald?
Nothing.
Mr. Rosario?
Yeah, I guess this would be, I guess I'll say something. So, Dr. Jones brought up that on our board agenda, it actually says category school board member matters, and then there's a subject line that says board members report on community meetings, events attended. This board never voted on what this subject ought to be. This board never discussed, neither did the previous board, to my recollection, discuss what this subject line ought to be. Board member matters is what matters to the board members. And each board member is entitled to their free speech, their First Amendment right, to say whatever they feel during the time in which it matters to them. In fact, supported by, and when I say it's nowhere, I mean it's not in policy, it's not in our protocols, it's not in our practices. So, in fact, going back to Robert's Rules of Order doesn't even have board member matters in there. What they have is announcements or other business or recommended, so that you can actually report on anything that you really want to under other business. We have board member matters, which is fine, but the real gist of that is what matters to the board members, not tied to any particular item. This is what Dr. Posca mentioned, and if that's what mattered to him, that's his First Amendment right. What bothers me is the use of saying things like, attacking for political purposes, or that's not the right. It's not your place, nor anyone's place, to discuss what is important to him. And we should stop using this platform to label things as political speech, when in fact it's his First Amendment right to speak on any item. Anybody. Even if I disagree with you, Dr. Jones, on any particular item, I'm not going to keep bringing it up and putting it back on the next agenda to talk about what I disagreed with you on or why I disagreed with you. It's just, it happens constantly. When you disagree with a board member, you need to add it to the next board meeting discussion session. That needs to stop, because that's using our dais as a political weapon. We have to stop doing that. Respect each other, respect to disagree, and just let it go. That's what was important to him. He has a right to say what he wants.
Mr.
I
McDonald?
would like to add one thing. To the point that Ms. Rosario made, Robert's Rules specifies that if there's something controversial that comes up, as it says, members may be disciplined for words spoken, but it must be only promptly after the breach occurs. And the purpose of that is so that we can maintain decorum and civility. And that once that item is left and new business has come up, that item is set aside. So I've not noticed in other cases where that's the case. But I've been telling people as I've been running for this position, which I now hold, that one of my goals is to establish and maintain civility. So civility and decorum does call that if we have an issue, once it is passed, it should not be brought up again, unless there's new information or unless there's some additional reason for which that topic becomes active again. So I would reinforce that comment by Ms. Rosario.
Okay, so it does say in there that we should be reporting about the events that we attend. We've all been put on committees, and I know Mr. Barefoot was on, I think, Indian River Shores Council, correct? And zoning and planning for the city, correct?
I'll have to verify which ones, but I do
Okay.
plan on,
So would Mr. McDonald then assume those?
I'll defer to the school board attorney, because those are ultimately appointments by the board.
Okay. So we need to get that clarification. Also, board members, we all don't go to those. We go separately to those, that's our chance to report back about what happened at those events. And I would hope you would attend those events, because I have gotten calls as the chair about board members not showing up at certain events that they have committed to attend. With that being said, any board member also has the right as a citizen to go to any other council, be it city, and speak about a concern they have. So we have that right as citizens for our free speech to be able to do that. The comment was made, the other board members don't care about that. I personally picked up the phone and called the mayor of Vero Beach the next day. So I do care about what happens in this town and what happens out there. I feel personally, professionally, that was the way I should handle it, is to call one-on-one to the mayor about my concerns about what all happened on our board and what happened on their board. And that's the way I chose to handle it. So yes, I do care, and I did handle it that way. I didn't handle it on the dais. The other concern I have is that board members should be reporting about the things that they attend. And if they're not, are you attending them? And if not, then maybe somebody else should attend. So that is our chance to report about what we attend. And again, sometimes there are times you can't go because we have other commitments with opportunities to attend for awards and things like that. One came up just recently. I asked Dr. Poska if he could attend. He said he had a conflict, so we didn't have anybody attend zoning and planning because I was first, he was second. So that does happen. But board members, we need to communicate that here or through our secretary that we can attend something so that the second can attend or that the board has noticed that people aren't attending these things. Just don't show, okay? Because that doesn't look good as a board corporate that we have people that are supposed to be attending things that aren't attending things. And that is our chance to come back and talk about those things in Members Matters. Mr. Rosario?
Yeah, I don't, there are parts of what you said that I don't disagree with, but I just want to be clear. Meetings are not mandatory for this role as the school board member. They are not mandatory. They're expected, but they're not mandatory. You don't have to attend meetings. It would be nice if you did, because then you could report back. But there are boards across the state who don't have daytime meetings because there are board members who work full-time. And so they have evening meetings to accommodate those who work 9 to 5. And then those thus what I'm saying is those board members who work 9 to 5 can attend, daytime meetings that happen in city council or in other places. And so that's why it is not mandatory. What is mandatory for us is to attend our meetings with the superintendent and to attend and be on top of, workshop items and board business items and voting items and things like that. But to make a blanket statement that you're responsible or whatever the tone is that you have to do that, or the messaging is that you have to. No, you don't have to. You don't have to attend. I do agree, though, in one thing that you said, that if you RSVP and you can't attend, then kindly let Ms. Maury know or somebody know that you can't. That I get. I appreciate that. But to make the statement that it is mandatory for us to attend meetings, it is not a part of the role, not by legislation. I mean, it is what is supported by legislation is to be involved in your community, and to be a representative of this position in the community. But attending meetings is not mandatory.
Okay, so I don't believe I used the word mandatory. What I said
you
is
did.
if I did, I apologize. But I'm telling you right now, if we all agree in November that we're going to commit to something, and we all said, no, I can't make that. It's on a Tuesday at 9. I can't do it. Fine. Okay, then another board member will step up and do it. We made those commitments to do that on behalf of the board. If you have a 9 to 5 job, you didn't make a commitment from 9 to 5. You made a commitment that was an evening thing that I did, like zoning planning. So I'm not asking that it's mandatory. I'm saying you made a commitment, follow through with your commitment so that the board can get the information back also so that we're represented out in the community. For example, zoning and planning, I don't get a vote on it, but when there's something that comes up that concerns a school or sidewalks or things like that, I speak up and say, did you think about this? How about that? And so that's our place as a board member to do. We all agreed to do it in November. Nobody twisted your arm that you had to do it. We all said, yes, I volunteer to be on that committee. And so if you volunteer to be on a committee, commit and follow through. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying it's mandatory that you should attend, but I am saying that if you agreed to do it, please follow through and then report back to us. That is where I think Members Matters is important, because then we learn about things that are happening in the community that we might not have known about. That was my point. Anyone else?
Yes, I have two more things. We need to discuss the subject line in the board member matters agenda. It should say board members report, not board members report on community meetings, events attended. Like, it should be what matters to the board.
So-
Or it could say, or I have another suggestion, or it could say, board members report on community meetings, events attended, or other items.
So are you asking for that to come to the board as a vote?
That's not, it didn't vote, we didn't vote on it for it to be what
We
it is
didn't-
now.
We didn't vote on a lot of these policies
know.
because they
This
were
isn't a
put in
policy.
place. They were put in place by previous boards. When you sit on a board, you weren't there at the beginning.
We did,
So there are lots of policies in place that we've never voted on. If there's something that comes to your attention that you feel like we need to bring up and address,
Yeah.
feel free to bring it up and address it.
I just did.
My
I just
point-
did. I just said in
but I just
addition,
asked Ms.
we need to
Rosario, would you
discuss
like to
this.
vote on it? That's what I asked.
Well, I'm putting it out as a discussion for board members to respond.
Okay, Mr. McDonald.
It would seem that it would be a good item to present to the board for a vote if that's necessary.
Okay, we'll put it on the next agenda. Can you put it on as an agenda item? Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think I would change it as well. I'd agree.
Dr. Jones?
I think it's okay as it is.
Okay, we can discuss it at the next meeting.
Well, it seems to me that was consensus right there, so.
Yeah, I don't even think it needs to go to the meeting.
I think it does if it's, if we're changing the word of a policy, it needs to be voted on.
This, Mr. Ansbacher, may I? We do not have a policy, sir, at all addressing board member matters. We do not have a policy at all, neither in protocol, that actually addresses the subject line matter of board member matters as it appears on the agenda. For this item, because there is consensus, can we just move forward with having it changed by consensus, since it is not a policy item and formal action does not need to be taken on it?
It would require regardless rulemaking under 12081, however it's originated, because it's a policy. Our policies constitute rules. So however you wish to proceed with whatever formality, it'll require rulemaking formality.
Okay,
Thank you. So it is a policy and we should vote on it.
it isn't a policy.
Okay, I'm asking that it be voted on as the chair. There we go.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
When we change the time that you need to submit a speaker's form, did we do that with public notice and a vote? Or did we do it with board consensus? Do you remember?
Dr. Moore?
Through the chair, that is embedded in policy. So yes, it was noticed and appropriate and ultimately approved by the board.
So it went through the whole sequence of events leading up to that meeting?
Yes, so if you're referring to submit your
Like a year
form
and
by
a half ago,
5:45
yeah.
or what, yes.
Okay,
It did.
okay.
It's a policy change. Policy changes we vote on. At least we've always voted on in the past.
I think if we're going to have it, if we're going to take formal action on it, I think we need to pull up our policy on meetings. We have a policy on meetings. Actually, I have it right here. It is policy 165. We can actually include it in there, that board member matters should say, board members report on community meetings, events attended, and other.
Okay,
That
so,
would be nice.
Dr. Moore, could you have, in your one-on-one discussions with board members, get feedback on that?
Through the chair, I'll circle back with the attorney. I'm going to figure out where that, 7 years ago, when that item was placed on the agenda, and provide that information to the board, and then afford the board the opportunity to have the discussion in regards to what it is or is not you all collectively would like.
Thank you. All right,
Dr.
next
Moore?
item, D, slander in
Hold on.
schools.
Excuse
Dr.
me,
Jones, go ahead.
I'm still
Mrs.
talking.
Ms. Rosario, you're interrupting.
I
No,
was
you're
still,
interrupting
okay. I still would like to speak to something that Dr. Moore mentioned.
on that
before we
item.
move- Yes,
Board member matters.
yes.
Go ahead.
Dr. Moore, in reviewing this agenda, and in reviewing this, when you go back, it is agenda policy, I'm sorry, the policy is 165.1, which addresses agendas. So the other one was 165, which addresses meetings. The one specific to agendas is 165.1. And in that, you will see that there is only the very first section addresses agendas in general. The second section addresses consent agenda. So there's nothing in there on board member matters, and that's where it would seem appropriate to be added. I do have another thing on that same topic. Mrs. Berenborg, you mentioned something with regard to contacting city council on behalf of the board?
No, I did not on behalf of the
What?
board. I did
Okay.
it personally as a citizen.
Oh, okay. All right.
I made a comment that each board member as a citizen has the right to go to the city meeting to speak. I said right after that, I contacted the mayor myself as a citizen.
Okay. Just want to clarify.
We are on item D, slandering schools. Dr. Jones.
Yes, before I begin on this, I certainly do care about the safety of these students. I've walked the walk for 44 years. Sebastian River High School was slandered at our last meeting. As I listened to comment regarding graduation 2023, almost a year after it happened, my response, which is documented, said that's not true about the leadership, and I would watch the video. Someone who has seen that graduation for 15 years sure didn't recall that. I had never seen anything like that. And before the night was over, a video came from a teacher there, and they stood for the national anthem. I did not speak at that time because I wanted to view the video. The teachers remained standing until the colors left the area and Principal Cummings said, "You may be seated." If you have ever organized a graduation, the hours it takes to make it special for our students and families, well, it takes weeks to get everything right, from the program to the setup on the stage, instructions for the graduates and families, to the invites and the flow of traffic. It is a challenging thing to do, but every graduation I have presided over or attended, they have all been great at both Sebastian River High School and Vero Beach High School. When the following statements were made by a board member regarding Sebastian River High School, that the majority of teachers at Sebastian River High School did not stand, was deeply disturbing. It is a sign that the nexus of people disrespected the military, Constitution, and cannot be trusted alone with children. That's a false allegation, and we need to correct it. These teachers in the leadership team work very, very hard, and putting a statement out like that is slanderous. And then the big red flag, an underlying problem with the school, and there's a dereliction of leadership. That's wrong. Chris Cummings and his staff have no dereliction of leadership, and board members can see that when they go to the school. The real concern that bothered me is this was 11 months ago. Certainly could talk to the superintendent, because it does say in our policy that communication should go through the superintendent. No personal attack should be for everyone, especially board members making attacks on an entire school. They were not there that night to respond. And then a comment to a board chair when she said she didn't see it, she was watching the flag. It was made that it was a great excuse. That's disrespectful. Issues, talk with the superintendent, who will talk with principals and get back with you. And the second one I had a concern about was the pledge. Go to our schools, you see they're great places you can visit. I have been in many schools, many days with the moment of silence. I've never interrupted a classroom for a pledge. But talking to principals, they're saying the pledge. And if it's one or two people, you handle the problem. But we don't say, no one stands, it's not happening at our high schools, I've seen it. The teaching and the learning about our country and patriotism should begin in the home, and our schools follow through with that. That's a great combination of our homes and our schools. And other celebrations to honor veterans, Memorial Day with our bands, and July 4th. Just saw that new veterans parking space out there. It's wonderful. Everyone should have a chance to respond, and when we put statements out there like that, they're just not doing it. People think that it's for all teachers in classrooms, and I don't know why that would happen, and I have a real issue with that. Yes, we have our First Amendment rights, but slandering the school in general is not what we should be doing as school board members. We should be talking to our superintendent and working with our principals. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. McDonald.
To that theme, I happened to notice a news article this last week which quoted somebody anonymously at a high level in the school district saying somewhat derogatory things about the school board particularly. And having met all of Dr. Moore's cabinet as well as himself, I want to first speak out and say I would not believe that any of you would have made an anonymous cowardly comment like that. I'm of the opinion that it was a manufactured comment, and they used the umbrella of the anonymity in order to further their comment. And aside from the cabinet and Dr. Moore, the only other ones who would qualify as that anonymous person would be members of the board. I, for one, vehemently say that I did not or would not cowardly say anything anonymously to a press person that would be detorious to this board, and I would invite others to say the same.
Ms. Berenborg?
Yeah,
I
hold-
agree.
hold-
Oh,
hold on
sorry.
one second. Did you want to address at all the comments that Dr. Jones made?
No, those comments were from last week. I think that, our last meeting, I think that passing items that are not directed at the same time, Robert's rules says that, decorum says that we should let them pass if the issue is no longer on the board.
Ms.
The issue
Berenborg?
is much in the community, sir.
Ms. Berenborg?
Yes, go
I
ahead.
stated in there that I didn't follow up right then because I wanted to watch a video. I know what I recalled and what I've seen for 15 years, but I wanted to make sure before I said anything. So that is why I immediately put it on this agenda. And I agree with Mr. McDonald. I never say anything anonymous. When I say something, my name goes with it.
Thank you.
Yep, me as well.
Thank you.
Ms. Rosario?
Oh, I ditto Mr. McDonald's words. It is for a high-level district person to make a comment like that anonymously is inappropriate and absolutely unacceptable. I completely agree with you. I still hold to my comments about someone's First Amendment rights, to their opinions. Whether we agree or not, I did not hear anything slanderous. I heard someone's opinion based on what they saw. And again, no one can come against what someone saw unless you can prove someone wrong. But otherwise, it is his opinion, and that's the way it should stay. So I appreciate someone's opinion again, even if I agree or disagree with the person, that is their right. And we have to stop using the dais to come against board members. That's what causes division. That doesn't bring unity.
Dr. Posca?
Sure. So if we go, I'll roll back because much of what I've heard is really a scarecrow argument. The conversation started because the public had concerns. So we've had a number of public complaints over the last year about teachers and staff and students at that school not participating in the pledge. So that was one. A public member came to the meeting to discuss that and those complaints. Additionally, there was another member of the public who came to speak who was a retired lieutenant and is married to a three-bird colonel. And what they found is that they were unable to be accommodated with a late start at Sebastian River High School. And this is a common issue that everyone knows. If you know a military family, they move around. And most schools are able to accommodate that. And, you know, for some reason, the staff at the school didn't decide to pick up a phone and call the district and easily solve a problem that would have taken a couple minutes. They chose to ignore that military family. They chose to disrespect that military family. And I think if they weren't a military family, I think that they would have tried harder to help them, but they didn't try at all. That's my opinion. So the public came, they had concerns. What I said is it reminds me of something I saw, and I did see it, and you claiming a video disproves me is very silly. Because I encourage people to go look at that video. The only teachers you can probably clearly see are the ones on that line that are facing the camera, and that accounts for a small percentage of them. And I will say they were standing there doing a great job. Additionally, my comments were saying that the totality of the public concern, these are red flags that there's a problem here. And, I think if you look around the country right now and look at what's happening at all of our institutions of higher learning, our universities, we see liberal communists really making the bridge now into terrorism and trying to destroy this country. And they did not, so these students, many of them are students, at least half of them by most arrest studies, were students on campus. These students did not become radical Marxists in college because of bad professors. It started in our grade schools. So if you can look around the country under that context and then hear that public comment from these individuals saying staff are not doing the Pledge of Allegiance and students are not doing it, a military family is being disrespected and not given any help to the point where he has to come to a meeting and ask for help. If you can see all these things and think there is no problem, I would say there's a high probability, or at least not that there's no problem, that it needs to be looked into. And that's what I said, is we need to look into this. And if you can't see that, then I would say that you probably are either a part of the problem or not super sharp. So these are all concerns that I have. I take my job as a board member seriously. And instead of taking it seriously and using common sense to warning signals and red flags that are both on our TV and being brought up by the community, certain board members and a union chose a different path together. So they chose a different path. And I'm going to summarize. I encourage everyone to go read the union press release. I hope they continue to give us press releases because I think it gives the community a great understanding of what that leadership really thinks and what they're about. So I hope we get more of those. And I hope, Peggy, you continue to comment on it. Because what it showed me is that you ignore the public concerns. You ignore what's happening around us at our universities. You ignore a military family being disrespected. And you create a scarecrow argument based on one part of a long dialogue that I had, which shows that you don't take your job seriously and you value protecting potentially liberal Marxists over protecting kids. You stand for the teachers, not for the kids. That's what it tells me. It's very clear to me. I'm addressing board members now. So if you can't see that there's problems in this country right now, and when you see warning signals, they need to be at least looked into, that tells me that you don't really want to do the job that you were tasked with constitutionally. And ultimately, you're really here as a representative of a teachers' union, not really the community. That's what it tells me really abundantly clearly. And, beyond that, I think that what I heard from the teachers' union, and I encourage everyone to go read their press release. I'm going to summarize it as basically they ignored completely all the public comment and their concerns. They focused on one sentence of what I said. And basically their statement was that there's nothing wrong here, there's nothing to look at. And not only, and we want you to retract your statement about it. So not only can you not talk about it, it's further than that. They want you to untalk about it. And I would encourage the community to reflect what ideological group is always trying to control your speech. And what board members consistently are always trying to control your speech in this very room. We have 2 board members that prevented almost 30 members of the community from speaking due to a technicality on the timing of the speaker's
Dr. Poska, you're
Oh,
bringing up old.
No, I'm not
matters.
I'm bringing up relevant information. And it's just today, we had another incident where people are trying to prevent people from talking. And I would just encourage the community to reflect upon what ideological group is always trying to control your speech. And you can draw your own conclusions. So I think what I also heard is that I guess everyone doesn't think there's a problem and it doesn't need to be looked into. And it's just a wacky conspiracy theory that maybe there's Marxist teachers out there doing bad things. And all I said is we should look into it, and apparently you do not want to. And that tells me a lot. So I think that maybe the best thing to do, since you all want evidence, is we should hire outside analysts, and we should review all the security footage from Sebastian River High School, because that's all outside the classroom. We don't have cameras in the classrooms. And then we can determine who is participating in the Pledge of Allegiance at that school outside the classrooms, what percentage of them participated and did not participate. And then we can have a further discussion on if there's maybe a problem that we need to look into in doing our jobs. How does that sound?
So
Okay, sorry, Ms.
I'm
Miller.
going to make a couple of comments. First of all, one point that Dr. Jones brought up was about, I made a comment that when the Pledge of Allegiance is given, no, I didn't notice because I was looking at the flag. And I'm going to reiterate the fact that the veterans ask you to pledge to the flag, look at the flag during the Pledge of Allegiance and during our national anthem, which is what I respectfully do. I don't need anybody else to tell me I'm not patriotic. Couple things. I went to Sebastian River High School because I do walk campuses, and I think board members should do that, walk campuses. And we have the right, unlike a parent, to walk in anytime we want and look at anything we want. And I did that on the Friday after our meeting. I went to Sebastian River High School, and I went there early enough to make sure I was there to watch a procedure going in, and I randomly walked in a classroom during the Pledge of Allegiance in this moment of silence. I timed it, 2 minutes. And all kids were respectful in the room I was in. And the teacher was so upset about what happened in our meeting on Monday that the teacher said, respectfully, I would like to walk out of the room and have you quiz the kids on everything that we do with the Pledge of Allegiance in the moment of silence. And I said, that's not necessary. I witnessed what I needed to witness. And the kids started yelling at me. They were hurt by a board member's comments. They were upset. There were several teachers that vented to me on that campus. Almost all of them that vented to me were military people. Very upset with the comments that were made on Monday about their school being unpatriotic. You cannot lump an entire school by something one or two people tell you or you see. Instead, as a board member, go there and find out for yourself. Walk the campus, look, spend the time on the campus. You are a board member, that's what you should be doing, is going to campuses and finding out what's going on for yourself. That's kind of like not listening to hearsay, not listening to a report that somebody gives you, instead going exactly to the source to find out what is actually happening for yourself and see it. That's what I did. I was offended by the fact that that comment was made. Board members, when you offend another board member, I would think, just like I did if I said the word mandatory, that I apologize for it. Dr. Jones, would you like to say anything? It's Rich.
I followed up on that military family. I think Mr. Seymour did. Did we have information on that? I know we can't go into the personal stuff, but did you ever get a hold of that parent?
Through the chair, I did speak with him after the event, and I reached out to him. I called, left a message, and sent an email.
Has he responded?
Not yet.
Because that's usually not the norm, because we have students move in at all times during the year. So, and what we usually do as a principal, you look and see where they were, and you kind of make it work with their class schedule. So you have not heard back from him?
No, ma'am.
Okay. When I said all this, and then when board members said, looked at, said you're not smart or whatever, radical Marxism and so forth, controlled speech. That's pretty offensive, but whether I agree with certain ideology or you agree with me, we can certainly talk about it without getting personal. I did just take from the script of what you said, and I still stand on this comment. Should have been done 11 months ago so that the superintendent and principal could have talked about it. Just putting out a blanket statement like that, really hurts schools. It serves no purpose other than to make them feel bad about something. And when you have an issue, communication should go through the superintendent. And then you talk with the principal and he gets the information back. On the pledge, I've talked to I talked to both high school principals and some teachers. If a student is not saying the pledge, the best thing to do, or standing up, is call the parent. That seemed to work for me. And then you go from that with our new form and making sure that the parent understands that. But, I stand by my statements. It should have been done at the time it happened. I didn't see it. And I've seen that for 15 years, but just these blanket statements. And as far as, caring or understanding what the issue is, I live it every day. I check on it every day as a school board member, teachers, principals, all through the superintendent, and I stand by what I said. It should have been done at the time. The reason I didn't do it at the time, because I hadn't seen the video. I knew what I remembered, but I wanted to double check. So that's how I feel. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yes. Since Robert's Rules for Decorum says that in order for disciplinary action to be taken other than promptly after a breach occurs, charges must be preferred and a formal trial held. Since the word slander was used, significant word, I just want to ask Dr. Jones, I guess, do you wish to prefer formal charges in relationship to this?
I've talked with the superintendent and principal, Mr. McDonald. I just wanted to get my communication across to them.
Anything else?
No, that's all. Just trying to move the process forward according to the rules and decorum.
So,
Dr.
nobody addressed my suggestion. So, if sounds like there's a paucity of evidence to some people. And, in order to address the public concerns, I think it would be fruitful to know if staff and teachers are participating in the Pledge of Allegiance at that school. I think we should do an analysis and a study, and we can hire analysts outside the school district to go through the footage at the specific time when the pledge is done and look at the percentage of people participating. And then we can have further discussion.
The pledge at
Wait,
school
Dr.
every day.
Jones,
I'm
Dr.
sorry.
Jones,
I'm
hold
sorry.
on.
Yeah,
Are
no,
you
you can
done?
respond, yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
The pledge at school every day?
Yes. So we take maybe a 3-month piece of data, we pull every footage of every morning, and we catalog the number of people who participated and did not.
I do not agree with that. I think it's a waste of money. You just talk to your principals and have them get back to the superintendent. That would be offensive to me as a principal. That's my opinion.
Any other board members?
I don't know how much that would cost. I wouldn't be opposed to, just throwing it out there, I wouldn't be completely opposed. I would want to know where it would come from and how much it would cost before actually making that formal decision. But the other thing that I would just throw out there is the timing of it. We're at the very end of the school year right now. I would just recommend Dr. Posca to consider possibly bringing it back to us in the fall, once school has kind of gone underway and we've revised the policy, we've revised the practices, set out, for these new expectations to be implemented. If you would consider, holding off this recommendation until the fall, then at that point, it can certainly be something that we can consider then, only because of the timing, of course.
I think it would be good to handle it over the summer. There's clearly a lot of emotion about the topic. And I think we're not looking at data in the future, we're looking at data retrospectively. So I think it would be better to look at it sooner rather than later. And I think, the narrative is that there's nothing wrong. If that's the narrative, then you really should have nothing to be worried about. So if you're afraid to look at it, that tells me something.
Are you talking about the pledge during the summer? You said to look at it during the summer.
No, during the school year.
Okay, I think you said summer.
Well, I want to have it
You're asking
handled
to look in
during the...
cameras, but they're not in the classrooms, but the kids are in the classrooms doing the pledge.
Correct.
So where are you looking at?
So
trying
any
to-
staff on camera in hallways and lobbies and courtyards,
So if there's not a flag in sight and the Pledge of Allegiance is going on, what should they be doing?
they should be pledging allegiance.
To no flag.
No,
Is it not normal for teachers to pledge allegiance outside the classroom, or is it ignored?
No, or to stand still and out of respect. I believe I read that actually in the Veterans Manual, but I'll have to look back and see if it was the national anthem or the pledge. Yeah, face north.
Sorry.
Exactly.
Rosario had her hand up first.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, if you're in the hallway and you don't see a flag, you stop and you salute. I mean, it's just, you just stop and you salute. I was at the air show this weekend, volunteering, and the Pledge of Allegiance came on, obviously, but where I was standing, I had no idea. I just knew everybody was facing a particular way. And so we just stopped and we pledged. I mean, I could have been facing the wrong direction. The flag could have been in the opposite direction. But it's a matter that you stop and you respect that there is a pledge being recited and you are honoring the flag of the United States of America. I mean, and so that shouldn't be a topic of discussion where they are. If they're in the hallway, they should stop and pledge. Little ones in the hallway passing, they stop, they pledge. They may not actually see the flag, but they hear it, but that's not. But so in a way, I think I understand where Dr. Pasca is coming, that even in the places that they're not in the classroom, that if they're in the hallway and they're still moving and they're not respecting the Pledge of Allegiance, that matters. I get that. That matters. If they're in the hallway, if they're in the office, everybody should stop. Pledge allegiance to the flag. Wherever you are, you stop and you pledge allegiance to the flag. I mean, I get that. That makes sense. And I understand that now you're just clarifying to go back. Even if classrooms don't have cameras, you can capture the idea of what is happening on a school campus. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, and I think it's going to be a sample of data as a reference point, because clearly there's some members who don't think the public concerns are worth investigating or talking about. So I think this gives us some data that we can at least talk about and address the issue. Hey, maybe we'll find that we're really surprised by the results. I honestly have no idea what it's going to show. I think we need to look. That's the whole point, is we need to take a look. And it's not to penalize those teachers. I would like numbers back at the end of the day. But it's so that we understand what's really happening. Because what it would show, if a lot of the staff and teachers are just going about their day on their phone or tinkering with something, it shows there's a big culture problem there. And I don't know if it's there, but I want to look.
Wait, I have a couple questions. Dr. Moore, do our cameras have sound?
No.
No. So they would have to go back, look at the video, and know the exact time that the pledge was given that day, correct? To be able to do this analyzing.
So through the chair, just remarks. I think you all have a superintendent who's charged with running the day-to-day operations
right.
of the
That's what I
school
was gonna say.
system,
That's what I was saying.
who is pretty damn patriotic and looks at all things from whatever the truth may be. So as you facilitate your conversation, the reality is, and I said it earlier before, in all things, we should strive to do better. In all things. And as you look at implementation for this county's largest employer, there's always going to be opportunities to improve. No one can say it's not being done, and no one can say it's being done 100% of the time. It's just implementation. So as I step back from the reality, not step back from the reality, step back from this conversation, let me assure you, I don't think there's a superintendent who's more in schools than me. I don't think that's, and I can say that very, very boldly. I don't think there's a superintendent who has a better structure on speaking with everyone who's sitting at this table regarding what they see in schools each and every single week. I don't think that there is. My understanding of what's taking place in the school is pretty solid. My opinion is, can we enhance, which you all just did, through policy, a clearly defined structure to make sure that the board's collective expectation around this very important issue is being done with the highest levels of implementation? The answer is yes. You just did that. You just had a really, really good conversation on streamlining policy, which you control, to make my life easier through implementation, or the implementation of that specific policy. And where there are issues of concern, whether it be in a hallway, whether it be in a classroom, as soon as that information comes to me, leave no stone unturned. Take the time to evaluate and trust the collective conversation that you're having around the policy. I can absolutely 100% enforce. I don't think we need to go back and evaluate, standing during, it's a lot of time that would take to give you what I already know. There's going to be opportunities when you look at that on some days, you're going to see someone walking across a courtyard. And I don't know that I'd be able to validate if that's actually when the pledge is going on or not. But we can be there and we can see it. And then we can make sure that this county's school system is reflective of this county's values.
Yeah, personally, I have a concern about spending money on something like this when we have so many other problems that we need to really look at our budget and spend money. Our budget's tight. I do think, though, that, Dr. Posket's making a good point, that if people don't understand that they should be doing this, our job is to teach it. Our job is to teach respect for our country. And so I would like to task, as a board member, I would like to see you remind people, remind our leaders that they need to remind their staff to teach kids this respect and to teach it by showing it themselves. And so I'd rather have you reiterate the importance of this from the board than spend the money right now. And then if it becomes a problem or continues to be a problem, look into it further. That's my opinion.
So through the chair, I don't need to be reminded to do that. It is an ongoing expectation. I think the conversation that you all had helps refine the onboarding of the expectation moving into the upcoming school year. That's all good stuff. I don't think you're going to find a person in the system that thinks I'm going to leave a situation alone if it's not right. I'm going to go full on head, damn the torpedoes and address this specific issue. So absolutely, this is important to everyone that's sitting up there, being seen from different perspectives. I can step back from the different perspectives and know from a person who always wants to strive to be better, both in my own personal life as well as my professional practice. We're always going to strive to do it better, and we're going to truly understand what the reality is in the moment and define what are the immediate next steps in order to improve it. And that's exactly what we will do.
Okay. Dr. Jones?
I'm just going to say, before Dr. Moore said it, just let the superintendent do his job, talk to the principals. As I said earlier, if there are some couple issues, talk to them, see what the issue is, and then we move on from there. But also understand how schools feel when this is talked about. They feel like they're not being respected, and we also need to listen to our teachers and our principals.
Mr. McDonald, do you have a comment?
Nothing further.
Ms. Rosario?
So I would just, Dr. Poska, you heard board members. It seems if this is an item that you are strongly for, I've been in positions where I felt really strongly about a particular item, and for other board members, it wasn't important to them, but it was important to me. And as we work as a board moving forward, either by consensus or by vote, that's where you'll see where the rubber meets the road. So if this is an item that is very important to you, I would be happy to support it. I don't want us to waste, money. Maybe there are some other, responsible ways for us to get the same information without hiring, a whole bunch of outside organizations. I do believe that as I'm thinking through this, what we're looking at is a few minutes of video in the mornings, because that's only when the Pledge of Allegiance happens. It's only for the first few minutes during announcements. We're not looking at all day long of video. So if you want Dr. Pasca to continue conversations with Dr. Moore, add it to an item to charge the superintendent with this as an action item moving forward. You as a board member have the right to do that. If this data is important for you as a board member, you should be able to get what you believe is important.
Thank you. I think that there's certainly a way to do it without it costing a lot of money. We don't need to look at the entire calendar year. Like you said, it's probably about a 5 to 8 minute period of time in the morning, and then checking the different camera angles. And then if we used a sample size as, for instance, one calendar month, we just pick a month and use that as a sample, like February. We're just going to look at the month of February in the morning and see who did what, and we're not going to do it with the goal of it being punitive or to embarrass teachers, but just to understand at least what is happening. Because any scientist or psychologist will tell you, when you go on that campus, it's a very different campus now. There's an observational bias. They know you're there. So you going there doesn't really mean anything. It does have meaning, but at the end of the day, you are not seeing what is happening every day. And if you think you do, you're wrong. So I think that this deserves looking into, given the response from certain board members and the union. I think it's worth looking into. And like I said, there's a way to do it where it's not particularly costly or taking up a significant amount of time. But I think it's an important and enough issue. If you look across our country, radical Marxism and its effects it's having in our country, I don't really know if you can find a more important issue, really, to the overall survival and longevity of the United States of America and the success of our children, protecting them from people who are ultimately trying to turn them away from their parents, turn them away from God, and then turn them away from their country, and be an ally in their rebellion. So I don't think there's probably a more important issue today in 2024.
Yes. Dr. Jones?
Dr. Moore, I have not been in a camera room as of late, so how many cameras do we have on campus, and what will they pick up? I know they've been improved since I was there, but...
This is, through the chair, as Dr. Pascal was just saying, that there may be another way to skin this cat, for lack of a better way of saying it. So just in looking at video as a whole, there is no sound, so determining when it... There's... My recommendation is pause the conversation and let me step back and make some recommendations in order to problem solve on how we can identify what the reality is. Right now, I just honestly don't have an answer as to what the most efficient and effective way of doing that is.
But there, we don't have a camera to see every classroom.
No, you don't.
Inside.
You typically have rotating cameras
Right.
and standing still cameras in hallways.
In hallways.
Right.
Right, okay. I didn't think we had in the classroom.
Okay, next item, uplifting schools. That's my item. Teachers are feeling attacked. Kids are personally upset about attacks. As board members, yeah, it's our job to check on things, to make sure things are happening that should be happening, but it's also our job to lift people up, to not tear them down all the time. And I think, you may say walking on a campus doesn't do anything. It sure does a lot to lift up people and make them understand that I do care as a board member. I care enough to be at something. I care enough to be at an awards ceremony if I can make it. I care enough to be at a graduation if I can make it. I care enough to be at all kinds of little things that we're invited to. We're invited to a ton, especially in April. I think it's important as board members to be on the campuses and to thank people as you walk on the campus for doing a good job. Because not everybody is a Marxist in our schools. Not everybody is lumped together as an unpatriotic person. I, for one, couldn't stand being in a classroom where a teacher punished the entire class for the behavior of one. And I feel like that's what's happening sometimes by board members. We're punishing the behavior of the whole campus for one or two people, and that's not fair. So I think that you need to look at this as these are people in our community, and they are voters, and they are people that care truly about their school and about their country and about their kids. I had one teacher specifically that pulled me out and basically, went on and on for, 5-10 minutes about her patriotic duty as a teacher at Sebastian River High School and how she needs to make sure that kids understand the importance of being patriots in their school. And she didn't like being lumped in with all this. And I don't blame her. She has served our country. Her family serves our country. Her kids are committed to serving the country. And I don't think we should attack all teachers because of a few that we think it's happening. So my feeling is we should be uplifting schools, and we should not be putting everybody together in one big lump. They need it. They need to be uplifted, especially now. They're testing. And they need to hear the good that they're doing. They need to hear thank you. Everybody that works somewhere wants to hear a thank you every once in a while for what they do. Yeah, you get paid for it, and people expect you to do your job, but it's always nice to have somebody say thank you for doing your job. And so I think we as board members should be doing that. Anyone want to respond? Dr. Posca?
Yeah, I'd like to make it clear, I never lumped everyone together, and I specifically stated the majority of teachers, I think, are doing an outstanding job. So
Yep.
all you're doing is making a scarecrow argument.
Yep.
It's not what I said, it's a lie.
Please
I
don't
think
say
the
I'm
majority,
lying.
I think the majority of teachers are doing an amazing job, and I clearly stated that, and I'm not lumping them all together. What I said is that when the community comes to me and tells me that there's students and teachers not doing the pledge, and that there's a military family being disrespected and ignored, and then I see a lot of teachers sitting at the graduation or standing and not putting their hand over their heart during the graduation. Additionally, the parking pass that was distributed this year was the LGBTQ rainbow colors. And I heard that from the community, that they showed up to get their parking passes for their kids, and it was all LGBTQ rainbow instead of a normal school color parking pass or something respectable. And that was very offensive to a lot of religious people, including a diverse group of religions. So, all I do is listen to the community, and I try to have an appropriate response, which is simply looking into it. And I don't think looking into something is ever something that people should be afraid of. And I want to make it once again clear, I did not lump all teachers together. I think the majority of teachers are doing a fantastic job, and they probably deserve a raise. But that does not disregard the public comments that I'm getting about concerns and the fact that it should be looked into. So your scarecrow argument is not well received.
Ms. Barrenborn?
Yes, go ahead.
Just reading the script, Dr. Posca's right. The second part, he did say that majority of our teachers are wonderful people. In the first part, though, and this is where it was an issue, what I saw was deeply disturbing. It was that the majority of teachers did not stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, did not put their hands over their chests, did not participate in it, and to me that's a really big sign that there's a nexus of people of the school who disrespect the military, disrespect the Constitution, and ultimately, as a parent, I would feel like I could not trust them alone with my students. That hurt a lot of teachers. So in the end, you did say that you respect the majority, but that part is the one that hurt the teachers. And you've got to own that.
Well, can I respond? It's probably important to note that I'm assuming all the teachers weren't at the graduation, right? So it was a small percentage, and then
probably
of
about
that percent,
45.
yeah, of that
15 rows,
percentage,
yeah.
what I saw was a large number that didn't participate. But not all the teachers were there. So I'm not really commenting about all the teachers at the school. It was specifically the teachers in the graduation event that I witnessed. So what I'm just trying to say is I support the majority of those teachers. I think they're doing fantastic jobs, and that's what I clearly stated.
Anyone else? So I never mentioned your name, Dr. Pasco. I said, could we as a board please start lifting our teachers up and not lumping them into groups? That was my comment. So if you took that personally as a scarecrow comment, obviously that came very close to your home. My comments being said generally. I feel like teachers that come up to me that are ex-military and say, I was offended by a comment, felt like it was directed to them. And they think what they think, and they have a right to think what they think. And when they come to me as a board member and say, I have a concern about what was said, my comment to them is, you're a citizen, you can speak. And so, you know, they have the right to come speak if they wish. All right, moving on. So one of the comments that was made by one of the people that came to our citizen input was about the fact that they were military and that their kids couldn't get into the school. So I had a teacher that stopped me this week who said, and her name is Chandra Williams. I'm going to do a shout out to her. She's at Storm Grove. She watched the meeting and she said, has the board aware of the Purple Star recognition? And again, this has changed and recently was put up on the DOE's website again. And so I pulled that and gave it to the superintendent and said, this is really interesting. It also allows schools to, right here, have a school page, web page for military students and families, have a military point of contact, have a student-led transition program, staff development, 5% open enrollment seats for military students. There it is. And 3 additional activities to support military families. I would love to encourage our schools to participate in this and apply for it. There's an application process they can go through. I spoke to the superintendent about it, and I felt like I should bring this to your attention. A teacher brought it to my attention, and I thought it's a really good thing that we could send out to our schools to help alleviate some concerns that have happened to somebody in the past.
That's nice. So, sorry.
Go ahead,
So
Dawn.
what's the next step, Ms. Berenberg, or what can we do, or how do we proceed with that?
I would like to maybe bring this up as an item for either discussion or action at the next board meeting to say that we would like to strongly encourage our schools to apply for this and participate. I don't think we should make it mandatory because in here it says that, first of all, you have to have so many kids that are military students. I don't know if our schools would be able to do that or not. Dr. Moore?
So, through the chair, my recommendation is I will task staff to look at all of the different requirements. Many of them that you just read off are already in place, as well as look at associated policy and then operate on the back page.
Microphone.
So not to repeat everything, my recommendation is let me look at policy as well as the items that you just read off. Most of them are already on place. And then I can bring back a recommendation in regards to what our current reality is and how easy this can be to be implemented. And I don't foresee there being very many issues with us being able to already have most of our schools superseding most of the requirements.
Thank you.
Any other board members?
No, I think it'd be a wonderful idea and something we should pursue.
Okay. All righty. Then with that,
Ms. Berenberg?
yes, go ahead, Dr. Jones.
I just want to add a couple things, because until our next meeting, you kind of forget them, but the inclusion show at Sebastian River High School was wonderful. I started that about 20 years ago, and it's usually a dance program, and the kids did a great job. Happy Teacher and Staff Appreciation Week. I sent out a little email. I know a lot of the schools are doing some things, but just from my heart, thank you to all the teachers, all the staff members who work diligently every day to move this district forward, all the district staff too. And Dr. Moore, thank you for putting that veteran parking out there. That's cool.
Yeah, I was going to finish with Happy Teacher Appreciation Week, and thank you, and staff. Thank you for all you do, and we lift you up. With that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting at 1:54.